Hello and welcome to History Sleep Stories. Tonight, we will dive into the fascinating and tragic tale of the RMS Titanic, a story filled with ambition, innovation, human drama, and heartbreak. In the early 1900s, the world was racing forward. Industry and technology were booming, empires were expanding, and people believed that nothing was impossible. This era of hope and innovation set the stage for one of the most ambitious projects of its time, building the largest, grandest ocean liner ever seen, the RMS Titanic. The Titanic was born out of an intense desire for progress and luxury. It was the pride of the White Star Line, a British shipping company competing to dominate the transatlantic passenger trade. Built in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland, the Titanic was more than a ship. It was a floating palace, designed not only to carry people, but also to showcase human achievement. Construction began in 1909 and took more than 2 years of relentless effort. The ship was immense, 882 feet long, nearly 93 feet wide, and weighing almost 46,000 tons. To put that in perspective, the Titanic was over a football field in length, roughly the size of some small skyscrapers in height, and twice as heavy as most other ships of its time. What set the Titanic apart was its combination of size, strength, and unrivaled luxury. It was fitted with the latest technology, including watertight compartments designed to keep the ship afloat, even if some areas were flooded. This engineering feat gave the shipbuilders and owners confidence and led to the Titanic's reputation as the unsinkable ship. But luxury was what truly distinguished the Titanic. First-class passengers enjoyed opulent suites decorated with rich wood, plush fabrics, and large windows overlooking the ocean. They had access to a gymnasium, a squash court, a swimming pool, Turkish baths, a grand dining saloon, and even a barbershop. The excitement around the Titanic was tremendous. Its maiden voyage, starting on April 10, 1912, was an event of global interest. The ship left Southampton, England, filled with some of the wealthiest people in the world, as well as hundreds of immigrants seeking a new life in America. This diverse group of passengers made the Titanic a floating microcosm of society, from elite aristocrats in first class to hard-working families in steerage. The ship's captain, Edward John Smith, was a seasoned mariner with decades of experience. He was known as the millionaire's captain for his steady hand and calm authority. Many believed that with him in charge, the Titanic was in the best possible hands. As the Titanic sailed out into the Atlantic, newspapers praised its grandeur and the marvels of modern engineering. Many passengers believed that the ship's size and advanced safety features made it nearly impossible to sink. This bold confidence, however, would soon be tragically misplaced. By the time the Titanic entered the icy waters of the North Atlantic, it had already passed several warnings of dangerous icebergs in the area. Wireless messages from other ships came flooding in, urging caution. Despite these warnings, the ship maintained near top speed, about 22 knots, believing it could spot and avoid any hazards. The night of April 14th was eerily calm. The sea was like glass, reflecting a sky full of stars. It was a perfect but deceptive night. The calm waters made icebergs incredibly hard to spot, especially without binoculars, which the lookout crew lacked due to a series of miscommunications and errors. The lookout, Frederick Fleet, was relying on his eyesight alone, a fact that would have disastrous consequences. Throughout the afternoon and evening, the wireless operators on the Titanic were busy handling passenger messages and socializing, diverting some attention away from critical ice warnings. Captain Smith, confident in his experience and the ship's capabilities, trusted that they could detect and avoid icebergs in time. This confidence would soon be tested in the most tragic way possible. At 11:39 p.m., the lookout finally spotted a massive shape rising from the water, a towering iceberg, dark and silent in the night. Fleet rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge, shouting the now famous words, "Iceberg, right ahead. The ship had only about 30 seconds to react. The Titanic attempted to turn starboard to avoid a direct hit, but the iceberg scraped along the ship's starboard side, tearing open a series of compartments below the waterline. The collision was like a giant roar, followed by an eerie silence. Unknown to most on board, the iceberg had damaged at least 5 of Titanic's 16 watertight compartments. The ship was designed to remain afloat if up to 4 compartments flooded, but 5 meant disaster. British shipbuilder Thomas Andrews, who was on board to oversee safety arrangements, quickly assessed the damage and reported to Captain Smith that the ship had no more than 1 to 2 hours before it would sink. Wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sprang into action, sending distress signals. First the traditional CQD, and then the new SOS signal to nearby ships. The RMS Carpathia, about 58 miles away, answered and began rushing toward Titanic's last known position. Meanwhile, the closest ship, the SS California, did not respond. Its wireless had been switched off just 5 minutes before the collision, and its crew missed the call for help, a tragic error in the unfolding disaster. Back on Titanic, panic began to spread, but there was also confusion and chaos. The ship carried only enough lifeboats for about half of the passengers and crew, a reflection of outdated maritime safety laws rather than any mere oversight. The crew tried to follow evacuation protocols, giving priority to women and children, but many lifeboats were launched only partially full due to fear and disorder. Passenger stories began to echo the terror of the night visions of families separated, hopeful looks toward the lifeboats, and desperate struggles against the frigid Atlantic waters, which averaged about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 1 degree Celsius. In water this cold, survival time was measured in minutes. As Titanic's bow sank deeper, the stern rose high into the night sky, putting enormous strain on the hull. Under this pressure, the ship broke apart between the third and fourth funnels. At 2:20 a.m., on April 15, 1912, the Titanic vanished beneath the waves forever. The Carpathia arrived around 4 a.m., but the damage was done. Over 1,500 people had lost their lives, with fewer than 700 survivors rescued from lifeboats and the sea. This tragedy shocked the world, highlighting human flaws, overconfidence, and the urgent need for maritime reform. The Titanic's demise was more than a disaster, it was a lesson. It led to sweeping changes, including new safety regulations requiring all ships to carry enough lifeboats for every passenger, the establishment of round-the-clock wireless communications, improved ship design standards, and the creation of international iceberg patrols. As we continue the story of Titanic, we move into the most critical hours of its voyage. The fateful night of April 14, 1912, is when history was forever changed, and the faces of tragedy, heroism, and human error emerged in full view. By mid-April, the Titanic had been sailing smoothly for 4 days, crossing the chilly North Atlantic Ocean at near top speed. Throughout the day, the wireless operators on board had been receiving numerous messages from other ships warning of icebergs ahead. These warnings were clear signs of danger, but for various reasons, many were not fully passed up the chain of command or were downplayed. Adding to the tension, it was well known by that evening that ice fields could pose a deadly threat. Still, Captain Edward Smith and his crew were confident the ship could safely navigate through these waters. The belief that Titanic was unsinkable gave a sense of calm, if not complacency. Late into the afternoon and early evening, the wireless operators were occupied, sending personal messages for passengers eager to connect with loved ones back home. This somewhat distracted them from the gravity of the iceberg warnings pouring in from other ships. One might imagine how this busy hum of daily life on board contrasted sharply with the silent threat looming ahead. As night fell on April 14th, the sea was unnervingly calm. Without the usual waves to break and reflect light, the ocean acted like a dark mirror, making it extremely difficult to spot the massive icebergs floating just beneath the surface. The moon was hidden by clouds, and stars twinkled faintly in the crisp air. On the crow's nest, lookout Frederick Fleet scanned the horizon. Unfortunately, the vital binoculars that could have helped spot the ice earlier were missing. The key assigned crew member who had them had been reassigned, and the binoculars were locked away. This small but critical oversight left Fleet relying solely on his eyes. The ship maintained a steady speed, cutting through the frigid waters at about 22 knots. The crew and passengers were unaware of how close disaster was. Imagine the heavy silence, broken only by the faint sounds of the ship's engines and the occasional conversation. At approximately 11:39 p.m., Frederick Fleet finally spotted something that sent chills down his spine. A massive black shape looming ahead. Quickly, he rang the warning bell 3 times, a signal indicating imminent danger, and rushed to telephone the bridge. The famous warning, "Iceberg, right ahead," was given to the officers above. The Titanic's officer on watch, William Murdoch, reacted swiftly. Orders were given to turn the ship hard to starboard, aiming to steer clear of the iceberg. The engines were reversed in an attempt to slow the vessel. However, Titanic's enormous size and momentum made quick maneuvers difficult. Despite the efforts, the ship's starboard side scraped the iceberg's jagged edge. The collision tore a gash in Titanic's hull. A damage stretched across at least 5 forward compartments below the waterline. Water began to rush into the ship with terrifying speed. Inside, passengers were mostly unaware that their dream journey was about to turn into a nightmare. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, quickly assessed the damage and informed Captain Smith that Titanic was doomed. The ship was designed to survive flooding in no more than 4 compartments. With 5 breached, it was a matter of time before the ship would sink. Back on the bridge, Captain Smith ordered the wireless operators to send distress signals. Jack Phillips, the senior wireless operator, sent out the urgent CQD signal, followed shortly by the newer SOS distress calls. Ships in the area scrambled to respond. The nearest was the RMS Carpathia, approximately 58 miles away. Its captain immediately changed course and sped toward Titanic's last reported position, a journey that would take around 4 hours. Another nearby ship, the SS Californian, was frustratingly close, but unable to respond because its wireless had been switched off for the night. Chaos began to spread among passengers as word of the iceberg impact got around. Crew members were tasked with evacuating passengers to the lifeboats, but the enormity of the situation was overwhelming. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for about half of the people on board, as outdated maritime rules hadn't yet required full coverage. On deck, the crew tried to maintain order, instructing women and children to board lifeboats first. However, fear and confusion contributed to panic. Many lifeboats were lowered far below capacity, some with only a fraction of the possible passengers. Below deck, the temperature was dangerously low. The water rushing in was just above freezing cold enough to cause almost immediate hypothermia. Passengers who fell into the sea had mere minutes to survive. The sinking of Titanic was not just a story of metal and sea, but of human courage and heartbreak. Some passengers banded together, helping each other to safety. Others faced despair and loss. The ship's band famously continued to play music on deck, attempting to calm frightened passengers as the disaster unfolded. Their selfless actions have become legendary, symbolizing hope amid despair. As the ship's bow sank deeper, the stern started to lift high out of the water. Strains on the hull reached a breaking point. In the early hours of April 15th, at approximately 2:20 a.m., Titanic split in two. The stern section rose dramatically before plunging into the icy depths. For those still in lifeboats, the once grand and mighty Titanic was quickly disappearing beneath the waves, leaving only memories and a chilling silence. When the Carpathia finally arrived around 4 a.m., the rescue began. Survivors were taken aboard, many suffering frostbite and shock. The ship's crew tended to them with warmth and care, offering blankets, warm drinks, and hope. Yet, for over 1,500 souls, the frigid night marked the end of their journey. The tragedy of Titanic sent shockwaves around the world. Headlines screamed disbelief. People struggled to comprehend how such a colossal, supposedly unsinkable ship could be lost so quickly. Investigations soon followed, revealing lapses in safety regulations, human errors, and technological limitations. New laws mandated enough lifeboats for every passenger, 24/7 wireless operations, and better iceberg monitoring, a grim legacy born out of a night of loss. As we enter the darkest hours of the Titanic disaster, the ship was slowly but surely sinking. The damage caused by the iceberg was worse than anyone on board ever expected. The Titanic's fate was sealed, and what followed was a desperate struggle for survival that revealed both the courage and fear of the human spirit. The ship's bow had begun to sink lower into the cold Atlantic water. As more compartments flooded, the ship's angle steadily increased. The stern rose higher and higher into the sky, a terrifying sight for anyone still clinging to hope. You can imagine how the massive hull groaned and creaked under enormous stress, the sounds echoing dreadfully through the night. One of the most critical issues was the lifeboats. The Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for about 1,178 people, but that was only about half of its total capacity. This was because the existing maritime laws did not require ships to carry lifeboats for everyone on board, just enough to meet outdated regulations based on the ship's tonnage. The tragedy revealed the glaring inadequacies in safety regulation that would cost so many lives. The lifeboat launch process was chaotic. Order was intended to prioritize women and children first, but the reality was much messier. Many lifeboats were lowered before they were full, with some carrying only about 20 people, even though they could hold up to 65. Panic and confusion played a large part, as did the fear of tipping lifeboats and the reluctance of some passengers to leave the warm safety of the ship. Amid this chaos, there were stories of deep heroism. Crew members, facing immense danger themselves, helped passengers board lifeboats and sometimes even gave up their own spots. The musicians of the Titanic famously played on to keep spirits calm, offering some comfort as the ship sank beneath them. Their music became a haunting symbol of bravery. Below deck and throughout the lower classes, many passengers faced grim choices. Steerage passengers often had difficulty reaching the upper decks due to locked gates and maze-like corridors. Language barriers and social divisions added to the terror. For many, especially families and immigrants, the hope of a new life in America was cut tragically short. Outside, the water was near freezing, just above 1 degree Celsius. For those who ended up in the water, chances of survival dropped rapidly. Hypothermia could set in within minutes, making the cold Atlantic a deadly trap. Those who fell into the sea clung desperately to floating debris or tried to grasp lifeboats, but few could survive long in the icy depths. At about 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke apart between the third and fourth funnels, a terrifying moment as the stern shot upward and suddenly flipped down into the sea. The ship that moments earlier had been a symbol of human achievement and confidence was now disappearing forever beneath the waves. The final moments were witnessed by lifeboat passengers who watched the great ship vanish silently beneath the ocean surface. Over 1,500 lives were lost, making it one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. The rescue ship, Carpathia, arrived at around 4 a.m. and began rescuing survivors from lifeboats scattered across the cold waters. Those who were saved were weak, injured, or suffering from shock. The ship's crew did everything possible to provide care, offering blankets, food, and hope. The aftermath of the sinking revealed harsh truths about human error and the risks of complacency. Investigations pointed to a lack of sufficient lifeboats, missed iceberg warnings, and decisions to keep high speed despite known dangers. The Titanic tragedy led to major reforms in maritime safety. Regulations now required ships to carry lifeboats for every person aboard and maintain continuous wireless watch. International iceberg patrols were created to monitor hazards, and the rules for ship design and emergency preparedness were tightened. Some remember Titanic as a disaster of technology and man's hubris, but others see it as a testament to human courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The stories of heroism, sacrifice, and survival continue to inspire people around the world. In the early hours of April 10, 1912, the RMS Carpathia was hundreds of miles away, steaming across the Atlantic Ocean on a routine voyage. Its crew was preparing to rest when the ship's wireless operator, Harold Cottam, picked up distress signals from the Titanic. The messages were chilling. The Titanic had struck an iceberg and was sinking fast. Without hesitation, Carpathia's captain, Arthur Henry Rostron, ordered the crew to prepare for rescue and set a course directly toward Titanic's last known position, approximately 58 miles away. Captain Rostron immediately took decisive action. Knowing they had to travel through dangerous ice fields, he pushed Carpathia's engines hard, increasing speed beyond the ship's normal limits to reach the survivors as quickly as possible. He also ordered extra lookouts to be posted to watch for ice and hazards. The crew sprang into motion, warming the ship by turning on heating and hot water, preparing blankets, food, and medical supplies to care for any rescued passengers. After racing through the ice-filled waters at top speed, over 17 knots, the Carpathia arrived near Titanic's last reported position at around 4 o'clock a.m., roughly an hour and a half after the great liner had disappeared beneath the waves. The scene was chaotic yet hopeful. Lifeboats, scattered across the dark, icy waters, bobbed gently, carrying nearly 700 survivors clinging to life. For the next 4.5 hours, Carpathia's crew worked tirelessly to bring survivors aboard. Special care was taken to assist those suffering from hypothermia and shock. Inside Carpathia, passengers found warmth and food. Doctors and medical staff had been stationed in the dining halls, ready to tend to the weary and injured. Blankets, coffee, tea, and soup were offered, providing comfort after the freezing conditions survivors had endured. Many were reunited with family members, though for some, the reunion was forever impossible. Carpathia's own passengers played a part too. They offered clothes, words of encouragement, and companionship to the frightened survivors. The mood was somber, but filled with relief that rescue had arrived. Captain Rostron's swift and compassionate leadership was later praised worldwide. He was awarded the U.S. Congressional Gold Medal for his heroic efforts to save as many lives as possible. Despite the exhaustion of his crew and the dangers faced navigating the icy seas, no life was lost aboard the Carpathia during the rescue. The ship carried the survivors to New York City, arriving on April 18, 1912. News of the disaster spread quickly, shocking the world. Headlines screamed of the tragedy, and people mourned the lives lost over 1,500 men, women, and children. Soon after, investigations began to what had gone wrong. They uncovered a troubling mix of human error, complacency, and inadequate safety regulations. The Titanic had carried lifeboats for only about half those on board. Warnings about icebergs had not been adequately heeded or communicated. Some decisions, like maintaining near maximum speed in dangerous waters, were questioned harshly. Out of these investigations came sweeping reforms. Lifeboat requirements were changed to ensure enough for every passenger and crew member. Wireless radios were mandated to be staffed 24/7 on passenger ships. International patrols were established to monitor the North Atlantic ice fields to prevent future tragedies. In 1914, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS, was created to set safety standards still respected today. Titanic's sinking forever changed maritime law and inspired technological advances designed to improve safety. Over the years, the Titanic tragedy has lived on in books, films, and memorials worldwide. It has become a symbol of both human achievement and the limits of ambition. The stories of heroism, sacrifice, and loss continue to touch hearts and remind us of the delicate balance between human endeavor and nature as power. Though more than a century has passed, the Titanic's legacy remains clear. Safety, vigilance, and respect for nature must never be compromised. The lessons learned that night echo on in every ship that sails and every life taken at sea. Thank you for listening to History Sleep Stories. Consider subscribing to History Sleep Stories for more stories from the past.